6 months ago, I released a review on the Five Nights at Freddy's movie when it first came out. The video got great reception, but I feel that I was very misleading with some of my points.
Also, the fort building montage, I liked it. Very cheese-tastic. Bonnie falling over and giving the thumbs up, I absolutely loved it. The way they were watching over, looking at the plan, that stuff, in my opinion, was great. 10 out of 10, best part of it.
Now that some time has passed with this film, I've really been able to think and reflect on what I actually think of it. Number 1. The movie was good for newcomers. Now, Scott and Blumhouse did intend for this film to be for the fans, which they did a really good job with. But they said that they also wanted to get new viewers watching it who might not be part of the FNAF fan base, which is understandable. I can understand Scott's motivation for that. Now, I'm a bit mixed on this because after I said this in my review,
it's very good for, you know, your typical Five Nights at Freddy's fan or nerd or OG or anything. But it's also very good for any newcomers who are going to come watch the film.
I thought about it a bit more and I actually ended up changing my mind. This film might not be the best for new viewers. But then I started talking to a few people who aren't Five Nights at Freddy's fans, and they said the movie was pretty good. But looking at it from my perspective, I don't think that this film would be great for everyone. The movie has a ton of in-jokes and references, but that isn't too important. What is important though is if the movie has a well fleshed out story and plot for people to understand. And this movie did, but this is where it would have been lacking for the FNAF fans who were used to these overcomplicated stories in this giant universe. But we all know that Blumhouse wanted to simplify the story to bring us back to the first game where there were a lot of questions that were left unanswered, and it was a much more simple story. And from a film perspective, this obviously leaves more opportunities for more movies to be made in the future, which we all know is going to happen. My new opinion on this subject is, it really depends on who's watching the movie. You might be a non-FNAF fan who likes or dislikes this movie, but I also know that there are a ton of FNAF fans who might have liked this movie or disliked this movie. It all just comes down to opinion. Number 2. The film was gory. Now, I did exaggerate this a bit when I said about the kills and the spring lock scene and other violent moments in the movie. My explanation for this is because my bar for gore is very low. Put it simply, I'm a pussy. I don't expect crazy over-the-top violence in movies, and so I didn't expect it in this movie. It's also not what I necessarily wanted either. So when doing my review, it was difficult for me to take into consideration the way other people look at things. But for me, seeing those corpses shoved inside the suits or Max being chomped by Freddy, even if it wasn't a straight shot, was still intense. And yes, I understand that logically a spring lock scene would look a lot more horrific than it did. And maybe a little bit realistic, but we'll never know because spring locks don't actually exist. And also, in my opinion, I don't think FNAF is really about gruesome and violent scenes. Yes, the graphic novels had some pretty horrific imagery, and maybe even the games to a certain degree, but not too much. There are other ways you can convey horror in media. However, was the movie scary? Now, this can really come down to opinion, but even I have now changed my mind to I don't think this film would scare most people. Maybe really young kids who realistically won't be allowed to watch this, which is understandable. But for most older kids or adults, this isn't the most horror-filled movie out there. We all know that jump scares and maybe creepy animatronics don't scare most people anymore because we've all become desensitized to it, especially with FNAF. But even if it doesn't work from a horror perspective, it would be great in a FNAF movie. It would have fit really well to have loads of jump scares and other horror aspects, because the ones they get right in this movie are really good. The restaurant is so eerie and dark, and the build-up on the first 2 nights is great. Some have said it took a long time for the film to go anywhere, but I think they mean that with the beginning, with the characters and exposition and stuff. But I think the hauntings and the dreams and the stuff inside the pizzeria is perfect. But yeah, the film could have definitely been a lot scarier. Number 4. The fort scene is bad. Now, I really liked this scene when I watched the film, and I said in my review that I looked at it in a bit of a darker direction than it just being a pointless cutesy scene. I'll just play that so I don't have to say it again.
There's nothing which is really filler. I mean, a lot of people could say that in the middle part, there would be a lot of filler. I'm not going to explain it. When you watch the movie, you'll definitely see what I'm talking about. But even scenes like that still have a little bit of meaning as to what is going on here.
And I still stick with that point because I still think it's a good way to bring across the children's side of the animatronics, while at the same time still being a nefarious plan. But I have changed my mind on it a little bit because I do think the film could have been stronger even without this scene. More time could have been spent to the horror and the danger of the animatronics, and that brings me to my next point. The animatronics were a letdown. I will be honest, the animatronics had a lot to be desired, because again, the pieces were all there. There were scenes where they looked really scary and cinematic. These things could have been a lot more intimidating, because when they act like it, it's really good, it's amazing. But when most of the time they're acting like this, then it's just a waste. But saying that, I still stand by them being the best part of the movie. Blumhouse and Jim Henson's put so much work into bringing these things to life, and with barely any CG or anything like that, these things look very cinematic and had some great shots that made them feel dangerous. I've always loved the glowing eyes. It's a very welcome feature in my opinion, even though it might seem a bit cheap to bring across emotions and feelings and stuff. So what's my verdict on the FNAF movie now? I still really like it, just as much as I did when I first watched it. I can now see a ton of more flaws in the movie though, I can't help it with that. Like I said, the movie's been out for months now, so when you rewatch it and when you think about it, you start to pick up that stuff a lot more. But the characters were nice, the animatronics are still really, really good. The biggest problem with this movie, it needed to be more Five Nights at Freddy's. They got the humor down, like Five Nights at Freddy's has always had a little bit of a humor light side to it, but there was a little bit too much of that. And we all know how good Scott is with taking criticism, and Blumhouse have also acknowledged this, so I'm sure when they're making the next movie, or writing it, as it is still in pre-production right now, I bet they're gonna do a better job with the sequel. But this is something that I am a little bit worried about myself. Other people might like this, but for my personal sake, I think I should bring this up. We all know that Scott is very good with criticism, but we also know he's good at exaggerating things whenever he gets criticized. Like, for example, when FNAF 3 was said to not be scary anymore, when he then created FNAF 4, he went all out with making it complete horror, and some people say that he might have overdone a few things, like the character designs, for example. Now, I'm sure that the majority of you guys are going to really enjoy a very gritty, horrible Five Nights at Freddy's sequel, and to be honest, for a sequel, that should be good. But for me, it's probably not going to be something I want to see. As I explained earlier, I don't want to say I'm squeamish, but I'm definitely not all for exaggerated horror with very violent, gruesome scenes. Like, for example, I watched the Banana Splits movie, which is basically like a pre-fan-made FNAF movie, and the thing I really didn't like about that movie is because its biggest thing of bringing across the horror was just its horrible, violent, gruesome scenes at every turn. Every kill was horrible. But again, that's just my opinion, and I don't think that should affect anyone else if they disagree with me. Tell me what you guys thought about the FNAF movie in the comments below. I really want to see what the majority of the fan base think. I think that the opinion with the fan base and audience in general is very split. Some people hated it, some people really liked it, and I really don't think that depends whether you're a FNAF fan or not. You can be whoever you want, and you can hate this movie or you can like it. But yeah, that's my newest and latest review on the FNAF movie. I'll of course put out a review for the sequel when it comes out next year. Oh boy, we've got a long way to go. And if you guys enjoyed this video, then make sure to leave it a thumbs up. And also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell if you do not want to miss a single upload.